Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to our Saturday edition video here in World of Warships, as we'll be doing an upgraded commander build video here on the Tier 8 Dutch cruiser, the Haarlem. So, as is traditional, let's first talk about what type of cruiser are we dealing with here. Is this a cruiser that it's maybe more of a brawling cruiser, and more of a long-range sniping cruiser, or more of a mid-range cruiser? And in my opinion, with the Haarlem being a heavy cruiser, she plays the role of mid-range to close range relatively well. Mid-range, the first part of the battle, and then as the battle progresses, you can get in a little bit closer if things are favorable for you. And when I say mid-range, I'm kind of thinking that 14 to, let's say with the Haarlem, 14 to 11 kilometer range, because for airstrike being 12 kilometers, you get to utilize that really well if you're close enough to enemy ships. Then, brawling, you can maybe get a little bit more closer to the enemy. But Haarlem is a hard sail on brawling capacity, so really you're just playing that mid-range role here at the ship. Now, let's go ahead and look at her armor. As we were making some comments in yesterday's video, as playing the ship, so if you want to see that video, it'll be linked at the end of this video for you to check out. Haarlem has a little bit of different things going on for her. So she has the standard 25mm bow and aft end plating. However, she also has an armor belt of 40mm on the fore end and the aft end of the ship. So you can see it's 40mm on the front, and here on the rear we have 50mm. So she's a little bit more tanky in the sense that she has a stronger armor belt in the back of the ship versus the front. So this gives you some freedom and flexibility. She also has a 40mm casemate armor belt stretching alongside the main hull section of the ship. You actually got to see me demonstrate this yesterday. We were bouncing and ricocheting some shots from an enemy Azuma, I believe it was. So you control enemy ships quite well in shooting that, where if they actually aim a little bit lower, your side plating is 27mm, so a little bit more vulnerable down there. So if we strip away the armor, you see there's actually a 200mm casemate armor belt behind that torpedo protection belt we had. So again, still more tanky when you add on the torpedo protection on top. The deck, 30mm. We'll make sure that's the same across. 25 is all around and 30 in mid section, so you're a little vulnerable to shells coming from a longer range. You have somewhat of this angled casemate armor going over the Citadel, and we go down to Citadel. The Citadel is kind of weird a little bit on these ships. This is something we're beginning to see a little bit more here in World of Warships. So it's pretty much waterline, but the mid section, so basically between let's say the front smokestack and the rear smokestack, it actually comes up. So the most vulnerable area you can shoot if you catch an Haarlem broadside is this midsection here. That's where you want to aim for if you want to try to hit that Citadel armor and wreak a lot of damage here on the ship. So 40mm on top, 30mm, and then 200mm of the Citadel armor. So you can play this ship well if you angle it and utilize your casemate armor, just because it's a little bit different and you're a little more tanky than the traditional Tier 8 heavy cruiser per se here on the Haarlem. So let's go and look at her modules and upgrades. Modules are going to be looking a little different here just because I ripped some off and I put them on the Johan de Witt. So we're going to be repurchasing them. I also moved the commander off as well up to the Johan de Witt. So let's talk about the modules. So in the first slot, I would recommend you taking the main armaments modification 1. This reduces the risk of your main battery becoming incapacitated by -20%, main battery survivability plus 50%, main battery repair time -20%. You could also consider the auxiliary armaments modification 1, but this is really more with AA mount survivability in mind. But I'd still argue generally going for the guns is good, even if the guns on the Haarlem are kind of just plain bad per se. So let's go for the main armaments modification. You don't need a magazine modification, which reduces your risk of your ship's magazine detonating by -70%, because you can take the Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates risk of your ship's magazine detonating. All right, second slot. You have a couple of things going on here. One, you have damage control system modification 1. This reduces the risk of catching fire by -5%, risk of flooding -3%. So that's nice. You're heavy, and you have that longer duration burn time here on the Dutch cruiser. So that's one of the reasons why I opted for this. Otherwise, I might go for something like engine room protection. Both are a good choice, but I just leaned towards the damage control system modification 1 just because you had those full duration fires. And then when you go to look at your special upgrades you can purchase in the armory for coal, you have the defensive A fire modification 1, which extends your consumable action time by plus 20%, and then your consumable cooldown time, -10%. Could be a good investment, but if I was really to pick what I would like the most on the Haarlem in the slot 2, it would be the hydroacoustic search modification 1. This extends your consumable action time for the hydroacoustic search by plus 20%. So this is really nice. You can use a coupon, get it for 12,500 coal, I believe it is. I've used it. Find it here. Upgrades, yeah, 25% off. So you can utilize it, save yourself some coal. So if I was really wanting to play the Haarlem more, I would definitely probably be throwing on the hydroacoustic search modification 1. Sort of recommend saving coal for some other things. That's why I didn't pick it up and instead opted for damage control system modification, damage control system modification 1. So that's what I would opt for as second choice. The third choice we have going on here, it could be the main battery traverse speed. It's 22.5 seconds for 180-degree turn time. I passed on that. I passed on the secondary battery. I passed on the AA guns modification, but what I'd recommend is the aiming systems modification 1. This improves your maximum main battery shell dispersion by -7%, meaning that you're getting tighter vertical and horizontal dispersion on your ship with the guns, and a slight buff to your secondaries of firing range plus 5% and maximum secondary battery shell dispersion -5%. So basically you're taking these for the dispersion, having a little bit more accurate guns, because these guns, again, they're not that great. For the fourth slot, you have a few things going on here. You have damage control system modification 2, you have the propulsion, you have the steering gears, and you have the airstrike modification 1. So what I'm going to recommend is you to take the airstrike modification 1. Your airstrike reload time is reduced by -20%. The aircraft get a 25% HP buff, and depth charge damage plus 15%, but don't get depth charges here on Haarlem, so that doesn't matter. So if I look at the airstrike, let's see here. Our reload time now is 100 seconds, so we have 1:40 before we can even use our first airstrike. The aircraft HP 2020. So when we mount this on, it might take a moment. Yep, the UI is going to be a bit slow apparently. I noticed this before when I was checking this out. It was taking some time for it to give me the exact changes. So we're waiting for that for a moment. The other ones, propulsion would be good. So it helps you when I was dealing with that Zuma shooting at me. I can move forward, juke the shots a little bit more. Damage control system would help with those longer duration fires. But because of how effective the airstrikes are, if you're really good with them, I'd really recommend them, just because, you saw those 10,000, 11,000 airstrikes we were able to do when we aimed well. And in my opinion, it's just better overall. Okay, so it's still not changed. So the aircraft HP should be higher. The reload time should be lower, so I guess we're just going to have to come back to it once the UI has figured out that we've changed some things on the ship. For the fifth slot, I'm going to recommend Concealment Systems Modification 1. This reduces the ship's detectability range by -10%, squadron detectability range -10%, and dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship plus 5%. So we put that on. That's going to get our concealment down to 10.9, and we're actually going to be able to get that down even further when we look at our commander. So we're going to circle back to that. Okay, so the UI is finally updated. So our aircraft HP went from, was it 2020 to 2,525. So it means that when you're dropping airstrike, it takes a little longer for the enemies to shoot down your planes with their anti-air guns. And then reload time drops to 80 seconds, so just a minute 20. So that's much more nicer, in my opinion, than the minute 40 seconds, which just means you're getting able to pump out these airstrikes that much faster. In terms of her modules, here on the ship, you have 2 and 3 millimeter guns that are just crap, in my opinion. HE shell damage 2,850, maximum AP shell damage 4,800. You just don't expect a lot from these guns. They're not the most accurate, and you're often going to find them lacking. Probably wouldn't be so bad, perhaps, if the reload time was at 15 seconds. But I think it's just Wargaming's way of balancing the ship, because you get access to the HE airstrike, and they don't want you to be putting out too much more damage than what you should. So that's why I think they kind of made the guns crap. When you look at Hull A, you can see that there is definitely some differences here. You get less survivability, less defense, and maneuverability. So when we put on Hull B, we're buffing our survivability, we're buffing our A defenses, we're buffing our maneuverability. So this is the first one you want to purchase if you pick up the Haarlem and you work on grinding. Then you can go for the gunfire control system. So you're going to start off with a stock range of 14.2 kilometers. Tier 8, that's a bit of a tough. If you're top tier versus tier 6, it can be okay. If you're bottom tier, tier 8 versus tier 10s, this will be rather a pain. But hang in there. Pick this the second modification up. It'll be 15.6 kilometers, which sometimes you kind of feel like you want a little bit more, but because of that airstrike, you really want to be playing more around that mid-range of that 12 kilometers. In terms of the propulsion of the engine, your 32.5 knots is your speed. You can pick that up, go a bit faster if you go for the Sierra mic flag. So if I put that on, we're going to go to 34.1 knots. So that is helpful. Let's talk about the HE Bomb Airstrike briefly. Our maximum bomb damage is 5,800. Number of bombs and payload is 6. And armor penetration capacity of 34%. And chances of causing a fire on target is 35%. So I've noticed it seems with the HE Bomb Airstrike, because you're dropping multiple bombs, if multiple of them hit, you have a much higher chance, I think, of causing fires with the airstrike versus the main guns if you're firing high explosive. So I'm going to be taking advantage of this, of course. They basically, when Wargaming built this ship line and interested in the game, they built the ship, they revolved the ship around the airstrike. When I think it should be more around the ship and the ship guns first and foremost. But that's just how they approached building this line from my understanding. In terms of consumables, action time on the damage control party, 5 seconds. Reload time, 57 seconds. You have an unlimited number of them. Your repair party, HP per second. So if I take off the India Delta, it's 200. If I put on the India Delta combat signal, jumps up to 240 HP per second, which is really nice. Action time of 28 seconds, so that's really nice. Reload time of 38 seconds. So the improved repair party, the cooldown time is quite quickly, and honestly, you really need that if you find yourself in a sticky situation with the Haarlem, just because you're not going to be scaring away enemy ships with your guns, and you have no torpedoes. Moving on to the defensive A fire, continuous damage plus 50%, shell explosion damage plus 300%, so action time of 40 seconds, reload time 76 seconds, and you get 3 of these. This really helps bolster your AA defenses, so definitely utilize this well when in battle. Your AA defense is 6 kilometer. I was kind of wondering when I was looking in the game or at the article the other day, I talked about it was showing 5.19, and I was like, I'm pretty sure it's 6. So it's a 6 kilometer AA bubble. So nice versus being maybe that standard 5.8. You also get access to hydroacoustic search. So you can pick up torpedoes 3.5 kilometers away, enemy ships 5 kilometers away. And then if you did what I recommend for slot 2 and pick up the hydroacoustic search, you're going to be able to extend the action time out even farther, especially if you add on the Sierra Bravo signal, which extends the action time of your hydroacoustic search. So here you can see consumable action time 110 seconds without 100 seconds. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and hop over and look at our commander. So if I was building a commander specifically for Haarlem, I wasn't going to run him on anything else. This is what I would recommend. I don't find needing the greasing of the gears for the main battery guns just to get them 180 degree turn time down. I found myself generally okay. So what I'm going to recommend as your first point is pick up the last stand. Your ship remains partially able to sustain speed and maneuverability with the engine and steering gears incapacitated. So you really don't want to be a sitting duck, not engine knocked out, or just doing circles if your steering gears get knocked out. So generally you want to have last stand on most all cruisers. And then for your 3 points, you could go one of two ways starting off. You could go for priority target if you want to know an enemy ship is focusing you, aiming at you. What I did starting off here, actually there's three ways you can go here on the 2 point line. You'd also go for demolition expert. Pyrotechnician was another name for it back in the day. Increases the chances of your main battery shells causing damage. Or setting a fire, sorry. So if you took that, right now we're sitting at 15%, we'd have 16%, and then there's some commanders that have an enhanced demolition expert, and you get that up even higher. Because you're kind of banking on fires to help cause the damage for the lack of the overall performance of the main battery. So perhaps you want to do something like this. You want to go for demolition expert first. Then I'd recommend is picking up the adrenaline rush. So then you have for 6 points in total. Then you have your main battery reload time is faster as you lose health, as well as your airstrike armament reload time, which builds in nicely to the 4th slot upgrade we took. Secondary battery reload time, and even pumping out some more AA damage. Then for 10 points, I'm going to recommend Concealment Expert. This is going to drop you down to 9.8 kilometer by sea, 7.3 kilometer by air, and this helps you get closer to utilize those 12 kilometer airstrikes. If the closer the better, the more likely you maybe a little more accurate with that. So that's just really good overall. So this is what I recommend for a 10-point commander. After this, I would recommend for a 13-point commander, pick up Superintendent. You have 4 repair parties, 4 hydroacoustic searches, and 4 defensive AAs. I think you saw in yesterday's video that I utilized a lot of these consumables when appropriate. So I'll have the video linked at the end if you want to see this in action. So just having this ship is kind of built and equipped not only around the airstrike, but the access to these additional consumables helps this ship not be a miserable playing experience. Then for a 17-point commander, I'm going to recommend you pick up the A defense and ASW expert, even though you don't have anti-submarine warfare on the ship. So that's a Debbie Downer here. But if I pull up the AA defense, when I click on here, you're going to see our continuous A damage jump up and damage from shell explosions jump up. 327, 1,940. So we got a nice little buff, +6, and now we're up to a rating of 80 in terms of our AA. This ship is a great AA cruiser, and if you play it to that purpose as well, it really helps out a lot here in the game. Then after this, what I'd probably actually pick up the focus fire training. Your airstrike armament reload time is -10%. The number of shell explosions in A salvos +1, and your priority sector reinforcement goes up by +25%. So that's just really fantastic. So we're seeing some better things happening here. And this leaves you with 2 points. So we're at 19-point commander now. So for their last 2 points, probably what I would recommend is picking up the priority target. This shows how many enemy ships are targeting your ship with their main battery guns. And this is the build I would recommend here on Haarlem. I find work really well. Because you have that airstrike rearmament reload time and -10%, probably what I'd recommend is maybe you go for the focus fire training first, and you can pick up the demolition expert later on, just because having a quicker airstrike armaments is very helpful here on the Haarlem. So in terms of my player performance on this ship, I have played 11 random battles so far at the ship. I average 83,000 damage. Damage ratio, I think, is over 2.57. Over 2,000 XP, generally speaking, per battle. The rating, can't quite remember. But our win rate is a little bit low, but we've only played 11 ships. But averaging 83,000 damage with going for a build like this, I think, is pretty good at tier 8 overall. This is a ship that you're going to struggle with when you are bottom tier versus tier 10s. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and cap the video there. If you have any questions about something I didn't cover, just let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to respond. Let me know what you're running on your Haarlem, what you have found effective between your upgrades and your commander. So until next time, take care.